Good evening, everybody. My name is Anne-Marie David, and I'm a director of the College of Law. I am in Queensland, sitting in Meanjin or Brisbane. Before we start and before I introduce our esteemed panel this evening, may I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am meeting this evening, as I say, the land of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples in Brisbane, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And I would extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander panel members and guests who are with us this evening. Welcome to day 2 of the 2022 College of Law Careers Academy. This is by far and away the favourite week of the year for anyone in the college, where we get to talk all things legal careers. And if you've seen the program, there's a vast array of possibilities to consider in terms of what we can do with our legal careers right from the get-go, from admission to practice to midway through your career. People are chopping and changing, moving around and finding a career, building a career that suits them. And this evening, we are very, very happy to be in the company of 3 extraordinary lawyers who are doing fabulous things in the courts. So 3 very different career paths that may appeal to you. So without further ado, we're going to be speaking this evening with Jade-Ann Reeves. Jade is an associate to a Justice of the Supreme Court of Queensland, and also the President of the Industrial Court of Queensland and the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission. Hello, Jade-Ann, welcome aboard this evening. We're also going to be speaking with Singh. Lily is a Senior Registrar in the Brisbane Supreme and District Courts. Welcome aboard, Lily. Good to have you with us. And last but by no means least, Ivan Ingram, a Judicial Registrar with the Federal Court of Australia. Welcome aboard, Ivan. Lovely to have all of you with us this evening. Now, we're going to start off by speaking with each of our panel members in turn to discover how they came to be where they are now, the decision process they went through, and what skills, qualifications, and other attributes they had to acquire to prepare them for their roles. There will be time throughout this presentation for Q&A, and at this point, I'll point everyone to the horizontal navigation bar at the very bottom of all our screens. You'll see the chat function there. I think we're all very au fait with using chat on Zoom these days. So feel free, as you hear the stories unfolding, to pop your questions in the chat function there. My colleague, Jacqui Owen, is moderating the chat this evening. So thank you in advance, Jacqui. And after I've spoken with each speaker individually, we'll have question and answer time. And then if there's a burning issue at the very end, we might pose that to each of the panel members. Right, so let's get started. Jade-Ann, could I ask you to chat with us this evening? I'll give you a more fulsome introduction to all our panel members. Jade-Ann is a graduate of the University of the Sunshine Coast. She graduated in 2021 with a Bachelor of Laws First Class Honours and a Bachelor of Social Science in Criminology, Politics and International Relations. Importantly, during her studies, Jade-Ann undertook clerkships and internships in criminal law, both prosecution and defence, and class actions. So a very broad-ranging experience path there. She also gained experience working in personal injuries law, immigration law, family law, and child protection. Clearly, Jade-Ann has a love for research, and she undertook an independent research project as part of her international relations minor, as well as completing the criminology and law research internship. And you'll hear, I'm sure, from Jade-Ann how important honing those research skills are for anyone who's wanting to work in one of the courts as an associate. We're very happy to say that Jade-Ann is a graduate of our College of Law PLT program, finishing up with us in March 2022. And she was admitted as recently as June this year. So congratulations again, Jade-Ann, and welcome to the profession. Now, in December 2021, Jade-Ann was appointed to her current role as an associate to a Justice of the Supreme Court of Queensland. So Jade-Ann, without further ado, you're a judge's associate. Exactly what does that role entail?
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Well, the role is very different depending on which judicial officer you're with, or if you're in a tribunal or a commission, which member that you are with. It's going to have nuances depending on who you're with, because you're a statutory appointment. You're not a public servant as other professionals in the court system are. So you're actually appointed under the Supreme Court Act. So you work directly and specifically for your judge or your member. But in a broad sense, you are a confidential and a personal aid to your judge, both in and out of court, and to help with their duties as a judicial officer. In a broad sense, you assist them with being prepared for court, with running court. That includes preparing briefs for them outside of court. A friend of mine said to me recently, what do you mean? Like, what do you do when you're not in court? I thought that's what a judge's associate did. You just did whatever you do when you're in court, and then you go home for the day. And I thought, oh gosh. So no, you have court roles, and some of those roles include, for me in the Supreme Court, a speaking role. So for example, in criminal matters, I actually arraign the defendant. So I will stand up in a sentence or a trial, and I'll ask them, I'll tell them the charge that they've been charged with and ask them whether they plead guilty or not guilty. You also impanel juries, and you have some other roles in that way. In the Industrial Court or Commission, I am bailiff as well as an associate. So I have a few different roles in court. Otherwise, outside of court, you really run chambers for your judge. So I'm responsible for any correspondence coming into my judge. No one can speak directly to a judge in terms of parties. So that comes through the associate. So I have to manage all of that. I manage his calendar, and then assist him in research, as you said, Anne-Marie. So much research and so much proofing of judgments that I assist with. I've spent about 2 weeks proofing one judgment at the moment, which is just enormous. But yes, and then other than that, go on circuit. I've been to Rockhampton and Mackay this year, and accompany my judge to professional events as well. So it's a whole array of things that you do as an associate.
Wow. So your days are probably different depending on whether you're sitting, whether you're not sitting, where you are, and whatever the judge needs you to do. I'm wondering, Jade-Ann, we often talk about transferable skills that you can bring from other part-time work. When we all put ourselves through uni, we've been working in retail or hospitality. Is there a specific role that you can imagine equipping you for some of the work you're doing? I mean, clearly a speaking role requires confidence. I'm wondering where you acquired those transferable skills.
Yes, absolutely. I think you gain the skills that equip you well to be an associate from a lot of different experience that you have. Certainly, my experiences in hospitality, working in hospitality and retail throughout my studies has helped my confidence in being able to speak to people from all walks of life, which you really need as an associate. Definitely one of the qualities that judges are looking for is the ability to interact and to speak with persons from all walks of life, from potentially self-represented parties if you need to communicate with them, and judicial officers and the esteemed professionals. So certainly don't think that you're on the wrong path if you're not quite in a law firm or something like that, and you are still doing hospitality or retail or something in that vein. Otherwise, certainly, working hard at your assignments while you're at uni, or putting in the effort in terms of PLT even, because your attention to detail is so important, especially proofing judgments. You really need to know what you're doing, and you're under time restraints as well. So if you've put in the effort early on, for example, in your referencing, your footnote referencing, you know what you're looking for, and you're not learning that from the beginning in terms of proofing judgments and things. So it's all relevant. Being organised, attention to detail. Yeah.
They're great tips, Jade-Ann. In terms of finding your way into a role like this, are they publicly advertised? How does someone find out about vacancies as judges associates?
So in the Supreme and District Court, the application process occurs about 12 months in advance. So you if you want to be an associate, you really need to know early on and start getting prepared early on. They are advertised on the Queensland Courts website. So if you type in Judges Associate, there's a link there, and it'll give you more information about when applications open. But normally December, 12 months in advance from when you would start. So the application process involves filling out an application form that you can download from the Queensland Courts website, as well as providing a resume and a cover letter as well. So you have a couple of different options. You can put in a general application. So you just apply generally to all Supreme Court judges, for example, or you can apply to each specific judge or whichever judge you'd like to apply to. I certainly would recommend applying to individual judges, which in itself is a very long process, because you need to research them as much as you can, of course, look at the work that they've done. You may already be familiar with some, but and then to tailor a cover letter specifically to each judicial officer is quite a lengthy process. So certainly if this is a role that you're thinking about, get started, really start thinking about it and give yourself enough time, because of course it's not something you want to rush, and it takes a lot longer than you think. In terms of commissions, such as the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission, their associate positions don't quite follow the same stringent dates and the same process as the Queensland Courts one do. So if you are interested in, even the federal courts or other courts other than the Queensland ones, definitely look into those and see what the processes are.
That's a really important point. Thanks, Jade, for raising that, because we often think of judges associates, and of course you think of the higher courts, but I assume there are similar roles in most tribunals, perhaps not for all members, but for select members, and for the lower courts and other arenas as well. So again, would that be an interesting way to get to where you are, perhaps working in another sphere as an associate and then applying for a Supreme or District Court Judges Associateship?
Yes, certainly. There are, as I said, the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission. There are other commissions. We have the Land Court. QCAT have associates as well, I believe. So, and even people who are Supreme Court associates or District Court associates often will apply for associateships either in commissions or things that are more tailored specifically to their interests, or the higher courts as well. So the High Court has associates. If you're interested in that, they hire about 3 to 4 years in advance, so you also need to get on top of that. But yes, certainly getting your foot in anywhere is a good idea.
And Jade-Ann, in terms of length of service, is it a year-long role? And what's the changeover period, and is there a handover?
Typically, yes, it is to 12 months. My role, I started a little bit earlier than normal. I started in December, but normally it is January to January in the Queensland courts. I know, again, the QIRC, the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission, they do things a little bit differently. They tend to be about a year to 18 months, but I know associates have been there for up to 3 years in the past. So it can differ. There isn't really a handover period for us in the Queensland courts. It's the former associates retire all on the same day, and then the new associates start all on the same day on that day. So it's quite chaotic the first couple of weeks for the newer associates, but normally the judges will organise a few training days throughout the year with the former associate for the incoming associate to attend, to try to get a little bit of training under their belt. But otherwise, you really are thrown in the deep end.
Yeah, and asked to hit the ground running.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Do you consider there's a bit of stress involved, especially in those early days when you're coming to terms with what all that the role entails?
Certainly, you sit in the Supreme Court in the trial division, which is what I am in. You sit in all jurisdictions. So I sit in the applications jurisdiction, civil, criminal. We also sit on the Court of Appeal at times as well. So depending on what your jurisdiction is at the time, your stress levels or the intensity of your work or how efficiently you need to work is definitely higher. For example, in criminal sentences, an associate, my experience in a sentence will look like me briefing my judge to start off with, and normally I won't get material until late the afternoon from parties beforehand, and sometimes 15 minutes before court begins, materials coming in. So I'm frantically putting together a folder for my judge. We get in there, we sentence the defendant, and typically in a sentence, people are either coming out of custody or they're going in, and that's a really, really urgent court order that needs to be processed. And the registry can't do anything until the associate has given their endorsement or their court order sheet to the registry. So you're under the pump because somebody's liberty is at stake. It's same for a bail. If somebody is granted bail and they're sitting down in the cells, you really can't be mucking around until 5 p.m. getting a court order sheet done. So normally, even if I have 4 sentences in a court in a day, we'll get through one, move on to the other one, and the registry is emailing me saying, please send down your court order sheet, we need to process this. So it can certainly be stressful. Other times not as much, so it just depends what you're in, but certainly you're capable. By the time you're an associate, you're capable to get through it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The high stress, the adrenaline is all worth it, because it's honestly the best experience I've ever had. So don't be scared.
No, that's wonderful. And just one last question from me in terms of it's a very close relationship, obviously working one-on-one for a member of the judiciary, and that duty of confidence, actually maintaining their confidence at all times. Is that, I expect that's just something that's taken for granted, but is it something you have to get used to, having that sort of close one-on-one relationship?
That's the absolute best part of my job, is my relationship with my judge. It's so incredible to be able to have a mentor who you live in each other's pockets, really, but to be so close to, the cream of the crop of our profession. It's a really wonderful relationship, but of course, you have to be completely discreet and completely confidential about everything. So it can be difficult sometimes, not if something funny happens, or something happens that's really interesting, not to want to tell everyone and say, oh my goodness, like this happened today, or my judge said this, or he taught me this. So of course it's something that you need to grapple with, and not grapple with, but yeah, you certainly need to contain things that are so exciting, that are bubbling at the surface. But that's something that you have to do in the profession anyway. So I think we all grapple with that from time to time, no matter what our role is as a lawyer.
Lovely. Oh, well, thank you, Jade. I think that's brilliant. A great example for others to follow, and hopefully will encourage others by listening to you this evening. I haven't seen any questions, Jacqui, yet for Jade-Ann in particular. I think everyone's been so enthralled with what you've been telling us that they're probably still sitting on their questions. So I might move along the panel, and we'll come back to you, Jade-Ann. If you do see any questions coming up through the chat that you can see, or Jacqui might be able to send through to you, we'll ask you to respond. But next along on the panel this evening is Lily Singh. Now, Lily is a senior registrar of the Brisbane Supreme and District Courts. She started her legal career with the Court Services Queensland in 2014, and simultaneously built her career and her family while studying to become a lawyer. I take my hat off to you, Lily. You've obviously got boundless energy. Lily holds a Bachelor of Laws honours also from the Queensland University of Technology, and a Bachelor of Business Marketing and Sports Management from Griffith University. I think that'd be a handy degree to have, and handy qual. I want to ask you more about that. Lily, like Jade-Ann, undertook her PLT with us here at the College of Law in 2021 and was admitted to the profession in July 2021. So to you also, welcome to the profession, Lily, and welcome to Careers Academy. Now, with 3 young children, Lily is enjoying the juggle of balancing both her personal and professional lives. That's a whole career story in itself, how to bring the two together and enjoy everything you're doing. But let's start first with your role as senior registrar. What exactly does that role entail? Is it like an associateship, Lily, or is it something totally different?
It's quite different to an associateship. However, we do a lot of work with the associates. I didn't have the benefit of one of these presentations right back when I started my law degree. So I kind of didn't know this is where I would end up after I finished law. Hindsight is 2020. So if I'd known, it's an incredible thing. As a senior registrar, I look after one of the 5 departments in the Brisbane Supreme and District Court. I'll speak to I'm on maternity leave at the moment, so I'll speak to the last team I looked after, which was the client relations team in the Brisbane Registry. I had 1 registrar, 2 deputy registrars, and 10 court service officers that I was responsible for, and they managed all of the service delivery for the Brisbane Supreme and District Courts. Majority of that work has to do with filing and answering questions from both the profession and the public. So when Jade-Ann mentioned that she gets material last minute and has to prepare it for judge, it's my team that would accept that material, make sure it's accurate, make sure it's correct, process it through the registry and get it into Jade-Ann's hands in time for her court time. So the registry, majority of the work I do is managing the people side of that, but there is a part of it where I'm working on the access to justice element of the courts and making sure that different cogs in the wheels of justice keep spinning. So that's making sure that we were still serving our customers through COVID, making sure that the courts were accessible via new methods that hadn't been available before. In a day's work, I might work alongside some of our lawyers implementing some of the changes that come from Parliament. There might be a focus on, say, some changes to domestic violence legislation, and we need to make sure that's implemented within the court system. So I might work with some of our lawyers in Queensland courts to make sure that the day-to-day operation of those changes is in effect. So we have about 120 to 50 staff, depending on which team you're working in across Brisbane Supreme and District Courts. And my role is to manage one of the teams that looks after the court's work.
Wow. Well, I think that's where your sports management role came in. Clearly you're running around doing that. That's extraordinary. Do you find that fulfilling? Having done a law degree, and one assumes you're going to go and practice law immediately, but do you find your role fulfilling?
I really enjoy the role. I enjoy the people management side of things. That's the extrovert in me coming out. I also enjoy seeing courts and working with the law in a way that's just not the traditional one side of the bar table or the other. And I think the benefit of working in courts is you can have a career in completely different areas and still work for the same employer. So you can work for prosecutions at DPP, you can work for legal aid, you could work for Crown Law. We have lots of lawyers within Queensland Courts itself, and have multiple different careers, all with the same employer. So is it motivating and fulfilling? Definitely, because while I've only become a lawyer in the last 12 months, I can see another 30 with the same employer.
Which is extraordinary, isn't it? In this day and age where people sort of chop and change and move around, you can do all of that under the safety net of having the one employer, which is fabulous. And Lily, tell me, you're on maternity leave now, so that's obviously a legislative right. Do you feel you're missing the job? And it sounds like an incredibly busy and responsible position. Do you miss that daily interaction? I want to get to what exactly you do on a day-to-day basis.
I do really miss it. One thing I really have learned to love about courts is it is really hands-on, and being in the courts is a really exciting thing. I enjoy working with the public and the profession at the same time. So it's not uncommon for someone to file something at the front counter, and the registry, as we're not lawyers, the registry can't make a decision on something. So I might write a judicial referral up to a judge for consideration. So this is an out of court function that we do from the registry. So I'll write up a judicial referral. I'll take it to Jade-Ann, as she mentioned. No one speaks to a judge directly. Judge will consider it. The answer will come back down to us, and then we'll give the answer to the client. I miss that. That's the exciting part of it, because you really never appreciate the court system until you're in it, and the intricacies of what we actually do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And picking up on something Jade-Ann said about you're liaising with everyone from just ordinary citizens who have a matter before the court, right through to the most senior members of our profession. How do you find that? I mean, clearly you could have those two people come in at once. Do you find that challenging to be able to deal with everybody? Doesn't matter who comes to the bench?
I think that when we talked about the different skills you need to do the job, any experience with working with the public is valuable in the courts, because you do go from, Mr. and Mrs. Smith who've just lost a loved one, who are filing a probate and have never interacted with the court system, to an exceptional barrister who's a regular, and just changing your style and adapting the way you work with them to get the outcome that you're looking for. So any sort of skills and experience that you can bring where you've worked with people or the public is really beneficial.
Yes, yeah. And I think we'd all agree. Law is very much a people role, isn't it? You're working in the service of people, if not directly interacting with them. So those human skills are incredibly important. And it doesn't matter where you hone them, as long as you bring them to your practice, I think.
Exactly.
Okay, so now I'm really fascinated by this being very different from Jade-Ann's role, in that you have a career. You have a career role, and if you want, that can remain in the courts. Do you have your sights on anything in particular? Are you working your way up a ladder, or is it more like a jungle gym where you think, I'll go and do a bit of time here and then race over there and try something else? What's your umbrella plan here, Lily?
I really like this question. So I mentioned that, hindsight's 2020. I came into the courts as a business manager at one of the entry levels. And I didn't even know what a deputy registrar was. I had my business degree. I'd worked for a multinational company. I knew I wanted to just study law. So I applied for a job within the courts with the skills that I had from my prior life. I got the job and was only in it for a couple of months before I worked out what a deputy registrar did, and was successful in getting some short-term relieving in that. It's very common to do relieving in the public sector. And slowly over 7 years climbed up to the role that I'm at and really enjoy, all while doing my law degree. And I have to credit the college, and there's nothing in saying this for me. It's just my honest opinion. Let's full disclosure there. My work experience at the College of Law did change my career trajectory. I would have said to you before my work experience that, nope, I'm really happy doing what I'm doing, but doing my work experience gave me insight into working actually for either legal aid or DPP. So to answer the question specifically, I will stay in my role that I'm doing now because I really do love it, but I would look for opportunities to spend some time practicing within the public service. And the benefit of being a public servant is you can go on secondment and come back to your position. So it is the benefit of both worlds.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? I expect, well, is it like being seconded out to a client? So certainly a lot of lawyers we meet here at the College of Law are in firms who have corporate clients, and they will send someone to work in-house on a secondment. That sounds similar, but yet they have the safety net of coming back to their role in the firm.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. Not long before I went on maternity leave, I was working with a lawyer who was seconded to us from legal aid, and we were doing some work on making courts accessible to people with a disability. And so quite rewarding work for both of us. And then her secondment came to an end with Queensland courts, and she returned to legal aid to continue practicing as a solicitor in a regional town, actually. So definitely exactly like that, where you can go and you get seconded out to different areas and you can come back to your permanent role.
Lovely. Now, Lily, you better discuss the brass tintacks of how we get into the public service in the first place. How do we apply for a role, legal or otherwise, with any of the public service environments around the country, I'm assuming? It doesn't have to be Queensland. So, yeah, what's the process? I
think the first strategy I would employ if I was looking to get into the public service would be a smart job alert. So going on to smartjobs.qld.gov.au and setting up a smart job alert where you select the different departments you would like to know about, and you'll get an email every time. I think it's usually once a day for any new jobs that are listed, and you'll get an email with those vacancies. I would be looking for AO positions, which is administrative officer stream, or PO if you're already admitted or you've already got a degree or a law degree. PO roles, which is the professional stream. You select the different types of roles you're looking for, and you'll get these emails through each day, and then you can apply for it. My tip would be, make sure you read the job application and the criteria and write to it, because public service can be quite competitive, and some of the jobs we advertise for, which is very common, a bailiff role or a role, we can get a lot of applications, and if people haven't written to the criteria, it can make it hard to make your application stand out.
That's interesting. And Lily, someone's just asking us in the chat, what was your first position or role in the courts as a lawyer? So clearly we know you came in as a business manager, but after you qualified, did you move around immediately?
I became a lawyer mid last year and have been on maternity leave. So let's circle back on that in a few years and I'll answer it again.
We'll get Lily back next time, folks, for that one.
I do work very closely with we do have a legal officer at the Supreme Court, and I work closely with her. And that's a really exciting sort of role where they work closely with the Rules Committee and different judges, and providing advice to the registrars within the courts.
Whenever I visit the courts here in Brisbane, I liken it to a city, pretty much like any of the big convention centres, where there's a whole world operating behind the front counters, and you don't realise how many people are employed in those roles and how important their roles are in terms of the administrative function in justice. So thank you, Lily, for sharing your story with us. It's really a very important role. Another question from our audience, do you feel your law degree gave you the adequate skills and knowledge to work in the court system, or did you learn more on the job itself? Good question.
Really good question. And I mentioned at the start of my discussion that I look after 10 court service officers. I often have court service officers who are simultaneously studying and working, and they find the civil procedure subjects a lot easier because they're looking at the documents that they're being asked to file or work on. So I found my law degree, I found there was a really nice balance between my law degree, my PLT training, and my on-the-job work. Work experience is really valuable though. And I think you can balance working and studying at the same time and get a really good outcome.
Right. So the next question is a beautiful flow through. How did you juggle law school while starting a family? So you've added another dimension entirely, Lily.
Another good question. I had 3 children in quite quick succession. Time management, a lot of consideration for my husband and I. We have to be very gentle with each other, allowing each other the time to study. I was 5 years into a part-time degree when I had my first child, and I studied at night when she was in bed. I studied on Saturdays. I got very good at taking notes, and they say 2 hours for a lecture and 1 hour for a tutor, or vice versa, depending on which uni you go to. You have to get really efficient with that time.
Yes.
So time and also allowing yourself time. I'm a runner, so I would run, making sure you give yourself that mental health break, because you can be on that hamster treadmill spinning around and not give yourself a break. So it's a combination of time management, but also being kind to yourself and to your loved ones.
Yeah, thank you for keeping it real, Lily, because we do seem to think we can do it all, but sometimes something has to give, and we don't want that to be our mental or physical health. So good points. Thank you, Lily.
And I think the one other thing I would be talking about keeping it real. I'm not a 7 student. I didn't go through my degree with first class honours. I would have loved to, but I just didn't have the time.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. And I think we set our own expectations. We're all adults. We're all adult learners, and we set our own expectations. So bear that in mind. You're not working to someone else's agenda. It's your agenda we're setting tonight.
Exactly.
All right, I'll let you take a breath, Lily, but I'll be back because I think there are other questions coming for both you and Jade-Ann. May I now introduce Ivan Ingram. Ivan's a Wiradjuri and Filipino man from Parkes, New South Wales. He holds a Bachelor of Laws, also honours. There's a common theme here this evening amongst our panel members, and also a Bachelor of Applied Science in Biotechnology from QUT, and also a graduate diploma in legal practice. So that's how we've all been admitted to practice here this evening. Ivan is currently undertaking a Doctor of Juridical Science candidature, so you're on your way to a PhD, with the University of Arizona in the USA. He was appointed to the Federal Court of Australia in October 2021 as the first Indigenous Australian in the role of Judicial Registrar. That is incredible, Ivan. I'm so sad that it's taken this long, but incredible to know you. Ivan is active in raising awareness of the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal professionals play in the practice of law, and particularly in those areas that impact on Indigenous peoples. Now, Ivan, that says a lot about what you're doing right now. What is your current role with the Federal Court of Australia?
Yes, thank you, Anne-Marie, and good evening, everyone. I think my role has elements of what Jade-Ann outlined as her role as an associate with her judge, a bit of what Lily was outlining as her role as a senior registrar with the Supreme Court. In the Federal Court where I'm based, a judicial registrar, which was formerly known as a deputy district registrar, we have sort of district registrars, deputy district registrars. They're now called national judicial registrars and judicial registrars. There's just been a change in nomenclature, but this is a sort of a quasi-judicial appointment. And by that, I mean, we have a number of powers delegated to us under various pieces of federal law. My appointment is in the Federal Court, so I have powers with matters that arise in this jurisdiction, but I also have delegations in the Federal Circuit and Family Court. And so that means I've got ability to conduct case management hearings and preside over some small applications, able to make certain administrative and judicial decisions across a number of matters in the different sort of practice areas. So that includes matters of tax, corporate law, migration, bankruptcy, a bit of maritime and intellectual property, for example. My particular appointment is in the native title practice area. So while I have all the same delegations as all the other general federal law registrars, I specifically only get native title matters allocated to me. It might be sort of easier to explain what I do day to day if I give a very broad overview of the native title practice area. Being a national court, we do have a level of coordination across the country of how we manage this national practice area. We're divvied up into various regions. I'll just put it very simply. The Eastern Seaboard is managed by 3 registrars. Northern Territory, South Australia, or Central Australia is managed by 2, and WA is managed by 2 other registrars. In that sort of divvying up, I manage most of New South Wales, a lot of southern Queensland and a bit of northern Queensland. The Cape and Torres Strait are by my colleagues. And so in our role, we have sort of 3 buckets of work, if I can put it in that way. So we have our case management functions where we're able to call on case management hearings, preside over the, I guess, the administration of the matters as they come through court. As you could appreciate, native title applications can last anywhere from a quick 5 years all the way up to 25. I think the longest one on our current docket maybe was filed in a former iteration in 1994. So we're coming close to a 30-year mark for it. So it requires a lot of attention. And the way that we sort of coordinate with our judges is that we've got judges that are allocated to various regions to case manage, but they can't possibly case manage every single matter that's within their region. And that's where we step in and pick up a lot of that judicial administration and case management oversight. So we usually get everything to a point where we're then able to refer it on to a judge for final hearing or a particular determination that needs to be made on those matters. The second body of work that we often get are sort of court-ordered mediations. So we often get to convene mediations in our matters, whether they're intra-Indigenous or intra-party mediations. They can be short ones for a few hours, like what I've had this afternoon, or ones that go on for many, many months, or in some matters, up to about 50 mediations throughout the whole life of a matter. And the third broad category of work, because of this jurisdiction, our work isn't always in the cities. It's out there in the country and out in some of the island areas in the territorial waters of Australia. So we do a lot of on-country management of the court. So we've got the powers to convene court on country, set up under a marquee, under a tree, in a dry riverbed or on a boat, for example. And so we become the point of contact of the court when we're out in the field and on country, and act as that sort of buffer between us and the judge. Because when we're in the field, you might end up being in a very, very small country town, and there might be only one pub for dinner, and that's where everyone, all parties have to have dinner. And so we're sort of the buffer between the court proper and everyone else. So some interesting stuff that we get to do as registrars. So a mix of legal, administrative, non-legal, a lot of logistics work.
Wow. You must have great dinner party conversations, Ivan, with all that experience. That's extraordinary. I was going to ask you about your very specialised knowledge, obviously, of native title. So was that the conduit for you into this role? Was it a specific requirement that you had that background?
Yeah, so with the judicial registrars in the federal court, we have our generalist registrars, and then we also have a body of 2 distinct appointments. So I'm a judicial registrar native title, and we also have judicial registrars migration. So for those specialist appointments, there is a requirement to have specific experience in that practice area. And so I've been practicing in native title as a solicitor since 2015, but I was a paralegal from 2012 to 2015. So I think I've just ticked over 10 years in this practice area overall.
And Ivan, was that something you had planned from the very get-go, or is this just you fell into place and you thought, no, this is my passion, I'll continue?
Yeah, I look back and it becomes more and more blurred as to what actually happened way back when. I started off as a paralegal in a national firm in sort of workplace, industrial relations, HR. It wasn't really a passion of mine. And then I had an opportunity to go become a paralegal in a boutique practice. So it only specialized in native title. And, I had the opportunity to do a bit of work experience here and there in other practice areas, in other size firms. And native title hasn't ever really let me go. So I happily say that it's kept me in this area for quite a while. I did take a bit of a sidestep over the COVID years. I stepped out of the practice of law, went into consulting, went into senior management in an Indigenous organisation that focuses on governance. And now I'm back in the practice of law, bringing those other sort of interesting skill sets and experiences.
Yes, as we say, nothing you do is ever wasted in law, because the skill set is quite extraordinary that you can bring, and the more well-versed you are across generalist matters as well as specialist will help you in any field of practice, I think. So now how do we, if I want to now become you tomorrow, how do I go about that, Ivan? How do I get your job?
Well, in terms of when the roles come up, they are advertised on the federal court website. They're usually put on Seek and various other sort of portals and channels, but we do have a careers page. We don't have many judicial registrars nationally. I think on last count, we're on about 42. So we almost parity the number of judges. I think we have just a few more judges. So it's almost 1-to-1 in that regard. These specialist appointments in the migration and native title area, they sort of come up when some of us leave. So they're not easy to sort of necessarily come by, but they are opportunities that do arise from time to time. The registrars in the federal court, because we do hold sort of judicial powers and exercise certain judicial functions, there are requirements for years of practice and sort of, a number of years in a particular area that's relevant to a jurisdiction that you might get allocated to.
And there's no preference for that practice being as a solicitor as opposed to a barrister, I assume?
Oh, yeah, no, it's just more sort of years in seat and relevant experience to a federal jurisdiction.
Yeah. Ivan, we heard the beautiful story from Jade-Ann, how valuable the mentoring role is between an associate and a judge. I'm wondering, is there something similar that you can speak to? Do you mentor others, or are you close to various judges and you find them great mentors and counsel?
I think an element of both of what you've just said. So I get to work really closely with chambers staff. So that includes the associates to judges as well as the judges themselves, and being a national practice area, judges from all around the country. So very regular contact with our national practice area judges. So we've got about 20 in that area, and about half of them are on the this side of the country, geographically speaking. So I have regular contact. They're phenomenal mentors, share really great insights. But at this sort of level of appointment as a judicial registrar, there's an element of reciprocity of experience and sharing knowledge, and there's a bit of upward mentoring, and I mean that respectfully, in terms of we've been in the area and in the coalface of native title for a long time, and some of our judges haven't practiced in that prior to their appointment. So there's that element of we're able to provide some insights and share our experience and knowledge with the judges, and similarly they're able to mentor us in their very senior and very adept sort of roles and experiences. So there's that element, but also we get to bring on a lot of sort of staff to work on in our team. I manage our internship pool, so we get a lot of students coming through, and I try to make sure that we cycle through a broad range of students who may not have had the opportunity to see what native title is and what it's about, and give them that opportunity and experience. We also get to work closely with the associates as well. So because it's a specialised area, we often get a knock on our door or a message on Teams asking to explain something. So there's also that mentorship there that arises.
Lovely. And you've raised a really important feature of the job that I wasn't aware of, Ivan, internships in the federal court. I'm not sure if that's commonly known or whether they're available perhaps in the Supreme and District Courts in Queensland or anywhere else around the country. Ladies, do you have opportunities for law students perhaps to come through as interns in the courts?
I can speak to the Brisbane Supreme District Court. The best way for a law student to come in would be to apply for one of our administrative officer / bailiff positions. It's an entry-level position, but it'll give you great exposure to the court work that an associate does. And it gives you that insight into the courts before you're in the hot seat of an associateship. The alternate position would be a court service officer, and they're across both magistrates courts and Supreme and District Court. A court service officer in the magistrates court does the role of both the bailiff and an associate in a very fast-paced courthouse. So,
yeah. And Jade-Ann, I don't know if you've seen anyone doing work experience as such, as opposed to being employed by a judge or for a judge?
No, not in my experience, not in terms of the associate level. There aren't work experience programs or anything like that. But yeah, I would just echo what Lily has said. And, if you are interested in an associateship or a position in the courts to just get your foot in the door in an entry level, I would think that being a bailiff would be an absolutely extraordinary role to have, and to sit in the trenches and be there in the court all day long. I couldn't think of a better opportunity, especially if you would like to be an associate, or if you're interested in advocacy or to be a barrister one day. A bailiff role, if you could get one, I think would be incredible. I wasn't ever a bailiff, but I do envy them. They get a lot more time in court than even I do. So I envy. Otherwise, there are actually secretary roles in the Supreme Court, in both the trial and the Court of Appeal divisions as well. So that would be a really handy role if you can get one of those. So,
well, you've all raised a really interesting question. Did any of you go into your current jobs having never been in a court before? I think, Ivan, will discount you because of your years of service. But Jade-Ann, had you been formally in a court? Had you been observing anything prior to becoming an associate, or was that your first entry point?
So I had experience in court prior. Obviously, throughout uni, I think you have observation days and things like that. In my practice I did an internship with the DPP, and I'm in court during that work experience program, which again, if you're interested in advocacy or court work, that's a work experience program that I would highly recommend. Also, my work in criminal defence law, I actually, as a clerk, appeared a few times in the magistrates court. So I had some exposure to court work, luckily, and I fell in love with it straight away. So I knew exactly where I wanted to be.
Lovely. Oh, I'll hold that thought because I'm going to ask you where next. Lily, what about you? Had you actually spent much time in the courts just hanging about in the gallery there, or not?
Other than a brush with jury duty when I was much younger, I hadn't been in the courts at all. And I would encourage anyone to do jury duty if they get a summons while they have the chance. Obviously, sometimes we get to that point where we can't do it, but if you're not at that point yet and you get a summons, please do it, because again, it's a bit like the bailiff. If you can get that insight into courts, it's a step. But no, I had not been in a courthouse at all before.
Wow, and look at you now, you're running them. Isn't that amazing? and Ivan, I should extend that question to you too. Had you spent a lot of time in the courts, loitering in the corridors?
Yes. Short answer, yes. I've had my first appearance was in this court and in the federal court, and I've appeared before registrars and judges, and it's somewhat of a surreal experience now to be alongside people who I used to appear before.
Right. Wow. I've had a question from the audience. They would like to know how to apply for those programs you were talking about. So there's internship programs, a formal process, obviously. Yes.
So we never used to have formal internship arrangements with universities until I decided to let's champion it and let's get some people in and give them some experience. So at the moment, I'm only partnered with 2 universities because I try to make sure that there are opportunities where students can get credit for their placements and get more, I guess, bang for their buck while they're here, and experience that they can use towards their degree. Am open to direct inquiries for placements and work experience generally, but we do have those arrangements with the 2 Brisbane-based universities, and also for PLT students as well, where we're open to that too, to take placements for the 4 or so week experience that students require, because we're able to supervise in that sort of role. So it's a bit ad hoc. We don't really formally advertise it at the moment because it's only 3 months on. So I'm slowly building up my case to start expanding it into other practice areas and have other registrars take on students as well.
So safe to hear, folks. You've heard it here first at the College of Law Careers Academy. Thank you, Ivan, for sharing that. I will remind our audience that we have 3 fabulous lawyers here who are very happy to take your questions. We don't have them for very much longer. So if you want to pop a question into the chat, do that now. I might just put a flag something too, and I think most of you may have experienced this yourself. In Law Week, so around the country we celebrate Law Week, I think it's generally in May, and many of the courts actually have an open day, ordinarily on a Saturday, I think, where the general public can come in and they can go through the court, sit in a court, and also go down to the cells. So I would encourage anyone who has not yet set foot inside a court to look for that opportunity. It's always great. Now we have a question. Is your first appearance before a court daunting? We'll take that one. Ivan, go for it.
I remember my first appearance in the federal court. It was incredibly daunting. In native title, we have regional callovers where the 3 case managing judges sit, and it looks like a full court sitting. And every matter of that region gets called on, and you're all sitting in courtroom 1 here. It's a very big courtroom, so you have that day, I think we had about 17 matters that were listed. I was midway through the whole sequence, so it was packed. There were a lot of practitioners. There were 3 judges on the bench, and I think I said 11 words, which was just my appearance, and the judge was happy that this matter had only just started and adjourned it. So it was really scary because I was expecting questions, but it ended up being a really straightforward thing. But it was incredibly daunting being the only person representing the applicant. And in native title proceedings, if people are familiar, it's the applicant v. the state and every other person within a claim area that has an interest that might be impacted by native title. So it was me and 3 benches worth of, bar tables worth of respondents. So it was incredibly daunting.
Wow, that's a lot to carry on your shoulders. That's extraordinary. Wow, but you'll live to tell the tale. Anyone else want to offer whether that was daunting? Go, Lily.
As part of my work experience, I was able to represent someone in the magistrates court, and it was daunting, full of adrenaline. I still have the piece of paper where I wrote down every single word that I needed to say. The defendant wasn't there, but I remember her name. I'll never forget it, and I'm not giving any secrets away here, but it was Beyonce, and I survived. I lived to tell the tale. So
well done.
once you get it out of the way, I assume it's probably smooth sailing from there.
One for the grandkids there, Lily, I think.
That is.
Jade, well, yes. Jade-Ann, your first appearance?
My first appearance, it was my 4th day on the job in a criminal law firm. I was a clerk, and it was leading up to Christmas. So I was in pretty casual clothes at the time, working away, and I got a phone call from my boss, the solicitor, and she said, they've just brought a matter on for mention, a child protection matter. I can't get there in time. You're going to have to go. I was completely unprepared. I thought, okay, all right. I remember how to do an appearance from my corporations moot in uni, so I just got that underway. I had half an hour to get to the court. I called my previous supervisor from the DPP. I'd just finished the work experience placement program, and I said, do you have a court jacket? Because I don't have one on me. So I had to swing by the DPP, borrow her court jacket, get over to the magistrate's court. I walked in quite opposite to Ivan's experience. There was nobody else in the courtroom except for the 3 other practitioners who were appearing. And we all stood up in front of the magistrate along the bar table and went appearance by appearance. And I, of course, was the last person to appear. So we had all these experienced practitioners appearing. And then it got to me and I was so nervous. And the magistrate, when I finished giving my appearance, said, is this your first time appearing, Miss Reeves? And I said, yes. And she said, oh, not to be nervous. And it was just a quick mention, but I was so nervous. But also the minute I walked out, it was such an exhilarating feeling and, you know, absolutely the most exciting, best thing. So of course it's nerve-wracking, but just one of those things that, you know, the more time you have on your feet, the better you get. So you just get through it.
Absolutely. Equal parts adrenaline, I think, for, you know, good and bad, but fantastic. And we all feel the same way. So yes, I encourage everyone to get up on your feet as often as possible, whether mooting or actually in real life before a court. My friends, we have reached the end of our evening together. It's so sad. I had questions about where to next. I'd love to know where you're headed, but we'll have to watch you. I think these 3 high-profile lawyers will be stalked for years to come now by our audience. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your careers to date. You each have fabulous places to go, I can tell from where you've been. So we wish you all the best for your future career journeys. We'll watch on with great interest. Audience, may I, on your behalf, thank this evening Jade-Ann Reeves, Lily Singh and Ivan Ingram for sharing their time, their expertise and their stories with us. We're lawyers and that's what we do best. We share stories and that's how we get justice done. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to my colleague, Jacqui Owen, who's been moderating the chat for us this evening. Do stay tuned. There are a College of Law Career Academy sessions each day this week. None of them are to be missed. So tell your friends and we look forward to seeing you online. But until then, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.